Hey everyone, my name is Lindsay Hampson. I'm the president of This Rock Inc. We're an ESG or environmental, social governance, and sustainability consulting firm. Basically, we help companies around the world figure out how to meet these new demands of their large clients, investors, bankers, or maybe employees as it relates to policies, data collection, and so on. But today's video is all about the SEC, or the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC. That's the body overseeing financial markets and ensuring investor protection, and the relation to sustainability, or ESG. So this is all about corporate transparency and compliance. So spend a couple minutes with us and we will answer some of your questions. So many questions people ask around SEC and ESG, two great acronyms. But what I want covered right away is, when will registrants need to start complying with the disclosure rules? This is always the big question. When do we have to do this by? So again, this is always fluid, but at the time of this video, large accelerated filers would be doing this in 2025. Accelerated filers 2026, and then everybody else by 2027. Again, very fluid. But the disclosures would be around governance, strategy, risk management, your targets and goals, and anything around severe weather or financial statement disclosure. Then there would be material risks, physical risks, and transitional risks. And the SEC has put forward some best practices for carbon management and even just getting the data, because that's a challenge. So they're putting out information about pulling scope 1, scope 2 emissions, and then looking potentially at scope 3, but at the beginning it will be scope 1 and scope 2. So I hope this part was helpful. Now let's get into a little bit more about the disclosure itself. So a quick introduction to ESG disclosure, or environmental social governance disclosure. So ESG, or sustainability or impact reporting, has become kind of pivotal in modern business practices. Lots of companies doing it more and more every year. Basically, it entails disclosing how companies manage risks and opportunities related to environment, social, and governance factors. This transparency is pretty critical for stakeholders because this includes investors, the public, anyone who really wants to gauge a company's sustainability efforts and related performance. So why do we need to be super transparent with ESG reporting? Well, transparency, as you know, already builds trust, and it helps to mitigate risks associated with potential greenwashing or misleading claims. Now, greenwashing is a company overstating its ability to save the world, or overstating its ability to have green materials only, or to source sustainably. So by being transparent about ESG practices, policies, data, targets, reporting, and so on, companies can really enhance their credibility and maybe even attract socially responsible investors. So the SEC's new standards mandate comprehensive climate-related disclosures to provide investors with reliable but super comparable information. That's honestly the key. Their disclosures cover greenhouse gas emissions, which is pretty obvious, but also climate-related risk and opportunities that could impact or affect financial performance, because that's what the SEC does. They aim to standardize ESG reporting, or environmental, social, or sustainability reporting, to offer both qualitative and quantitative metrics to help give insights into management strategies around risk. So the SEC aims to enhance consistency, comparability, reliability, usefulness of all this data and disclosures to help investors in making decisions about process. Many companies are already doing some of these, especially across the world. There are lots of companies already reporting in sustainability, lots of different standards out there. It's nice to see the SEC step up to start picking a framework in order to report on some of these things I just talked about. So we've decided to boil this down to 8 highlights of the SEC's new rules on ESG, or sustainability disclosure. Number 1 is climate-related risks. So this is, companies must disclose any climate risks they know about or that might have a material impact on their business strategy, their operations, or their financial condition. Okay, number 2 is material impacts. So disclosures must be both actual and potential material impacts. So A funny example would be a restaurant. If a restaurant is very dependent on lettuce, for example, it would want to be sure to track risks associated with attaining the lettuce. So if there is some drought happening in California, for example, where they source lettuce, then this is a potential physical risk of climate change on their supply chain, on their bottom line. Number 3 is mitigation activities. If a company has started to undertake activities that would mitigate or adapt the risk, then you'd want to talk about that here. I talked about it a little bit already. You would want to get into the qualitative and quantitative descriptions of how these things would work and how they would have an impact on financial estimates and assumptions. And number 4 is governance and oversight. So companies need to talk about or disclose at the board level and the role of management, anything to do with material climate risks. So you would have to be transparent internally and externally with all your stakeholders, but this is particularly about your board of directors and your managers. All right, number 5 is scope 1 and scope 2 GHG emissions. That's greenhouse gas emissions. So large accelerated filers and accelerated filers must disclose their scope 1 and scope 2 greenhouse gas emissions. So a little bit more on that. If you're curious what that is, you can go and Google greenhouse gas emissions scope 1 and 2. We have a video on it on YouTube. Number 6, risk management processes. Companies will need to describe their process for identifying, assessing, and managing material climate-related risks. Number 6 is financial statement disclosure. So in the footnotes of your financial statements, companies must provide information about the financial impacts of severe weather events or carbon offsets or renewable energy certificates or material impacts on financial estimates, for example, and assumptions due to climate-related targets or transition plans. And then finally, number 8 is implementation timelines. So the new disclosure requirements will be phased in with large accelerated filers required to comply by the end of 2025. Again, this is fluid right now. It's not been set in stone, so definitely stay tuned to when deadlines are or when they may be changing to. So what are the steps for compliance, or what are my hot tips or best practices? Well, I have 5 of them. The first is understand the reporting requirement. That's a pretty obvious one. Make sure you familiarize yourself with the SEC guidelines to make sure that your company is complying. Number 2 is data collection and analysis. So you need to implement some processes. They could be fairly rigorous. You're going to be pulling data from a bunch of different departments around the company because it's environmental, social, governance data. It could live in HR, it could live in operations, it could live in finance, and so on. So you want to make sure that the data is coming in and it's complete and that it's reliable. Number 3, internal controls and processes. That's just make sure you have strong internal controls to make sure you can validate the data so you know it's right and that it will be compliant. Number 4 is stakeholder engagement. You can't make this thing on your own. Trust me. If you're just one person in a large company, you're going to need to work with all kinds of different stakeholders to understand ESG, your priorities, and this will help to increase transparency in your reporting. I mentioned this above, but there's going to be people from finance, HR, operations, and so on, helping you pull data together. The last one is continuously improve. No one's thinking your first report's going to be perfect. It won't be. Sustainability is a journey. So adapt to practices, figure out ways to get more efficient, maybe more robust baseline so that next year you can have a better target, get some stakeholder feedback, and you'll make this thing better year after year. Companies adapting to these new standards showcase improved transparency. So, for instance, organizations that have integrated environmental and social metrics into their financial reports or annual statements, they enhance investor confidence and demonstrate proactive risk management. That could be the physical or the regulatory risks of climate change, for example. The SEC relies on standards like the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, the TCFD, Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, which is SASB, now the ISSB, so many acronyms. They also rely on the GRI, which is the Global Reporting Initiative for Climate Disclosures. So everything is aimed to ensure everyone's being super clear, it's comparable, and it's a reliable reporting for climate-related risks and opportunities by companies. All right, I hope this video was helpful. To quickly summarize, number one is embrace transparency because it's going to build trust and resilience in the marketplace. It's a no-brainer. Meeting SEC standards ensures regulatory compliance and helps company reputation. It also unlocks opportunities because if you're transparently reporting ESG, then it opens up avenues for sustainable growth, like we talked about. That is increasing revenue, decreasing expenses for profitability. It also strengthens stakeholder trust and engagement. And then there's always this continued jurisdictional difference. So always check out final rulemaking because it is codified ongoing with jurisdictional variations. This could be across countries or geographies or even states like California. All right, I hope this was helpful to you. Thanks again for watching. If you ever have any questions for us, you can reach us in the comments below or go to thisrockesg.com. Thanks so much. See you later.
I'm in sync with the earth. 10 toes deep, flower child from the turf. I never switch sides, like even